At Bet365, we don't do ordinary. We believe that every sport should be epic. Every home run, every hit, every inning, every play. From the moments that are legendary to the ones that fly under the radar. See for yourself when you sign up today and get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. 21 plus only. Must be physically located in Virginia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Terms and conditions apply.
Hi, I'm Josh Levin, and this is Hang Up and Listen for the week of May 28th, 2024. On this week's show, we'll discuss the big storylines in the NBA's conference finals, including the stardom of the Mavericks, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, whatever it is that Draymond Green is doing on Inside the NBA, and the maybe possible greatness of the Boston Celtics. Then Michael McCann of Sportico will join us to break down the multi-billion-dollar settlement that should mark the end of amateurism in college sports. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm the author of the book The Queen and the host of an upcoming slow burn season on the rise of Fox News. Also in D.C., a man whose greatness has never been in question. He's the author of the books Word Freak, A Few Seconds of Panic, and Wild and Outside. Stefan Fatsis, hello.
Hey, Josh. Had a good weekend. Did some Scrabble commentary. Called a 7-game showdown between two of the top players in North America. It was really fun. Well, it was a best of 7. It only went 5.
I hear that some of the competitors were confused about why your commentary was just about like Socrates and Beethoven and the Conference of Champions, but they're just maybe too young to understand that that was a tribute to Bill Walton.
Throw down the bingo, big man. Throw down the bingo.
Joining us from Palo Alto, a man who defends Stefan at every turn, a man whose greatness has also been verified by a panel composed of podcast award jurors, children's sprint coaches, and energy drink manufacturers. It is the birthday gentleman, Joel Anderson of Slate. Hey, Joel.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I haven't talked to any of my youth track coaches in a while, so I don't know if they still feel the same way. But I still appreciate you, Coach Walker, Coach Dade, Coach Mitchell.
Yeah, just a heads up, the way that Joel tells you it's his birthday is by saying, it would be weird if I didn't mention this. It's my birthday. So thank you for not making it weird.
If somebody already has texted me this morning saying, hey, why didn't you tell us it was your birthday today? And I'm like, what middle-aged man walks around telling people before somebody asks, oh, it's my birthday? So then I was just like, oh, am I being weird about this? So anyway, I just wanted to put it out there just in case.
I got a non-birthday question before we move on. Did you see that tweet I sent to you, Joel, about the fastest 10-year-old?
Oh, yeah, I did. Well, man, every year there's a fastest 10-year-old of that year, so this is inheriting my legacy, basically. I know the kids today, though, are so much faster than I was. The girls' national record in the 100 is faster than the time I put out the year that I was the fastest boy in the country. So things have changed a lot over the last, is it 2 generations or 1 generation?
Look, if they had the right energy drinks when you were 10, Joel, I am sure that you would have been putting up these times.
I was just fueling myself with fruit roll-ups and, probably juice. I used to drink juice.
He was juicing. Now, as always, we want to thank our Slate Plus members for making Joel's birthday so special. And we want to let you know that in our bonus episode this week, we're going to discuss the athlete, the activist, the announcer, Bill Walton, who died on Monday at age 71. We are also going to hear about the big redhead and the Afterball portion of the program. But if you want the whole Megillah, you need to be a Slate Plus member. And that bonus episode is available right now. If you don't subscribe, there are 2 ways for you to hear it. You can either subscribe right now by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. Looking for an assist with your credit card, but can't get a hold of anyone? Luckily, with 24/7 US-based live customer service from Discover, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, you heard that right. You can talk to a real human in customer service anytime. Sounds like a real game changer. Make the right call and get the service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
At Bet365, we don't do ordinary. We believe that every sport should be epic. Every home run, every hit, every inning, every play. From the moments that are legendary to the ones that fly under the radar. Whether it's a walk-off grand slam or a base hit to center field. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. 21 plus only. Must be physically located in Virginia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
In 1978, gay people in California faced a dire threat.
Proposition 6, the Briggs Initiative.
The teaching profession is riddled with the homosexual element.
John Briggs is going to fire every gay and lesbian school teacher in the state of California.
I'm Christina Cauterucci. This season on Slow Burn, we'll explore how a nationwide backlash against gays and lesbians led to a massive showdown in California.
This was tens of thousands of pissed off gay guys and lesbians roaring down Market Street.
With so much at stake, young people became activists.
We've got to fight back. We can't let this happen in California.
And activists became leaders.
My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you.
Slow Burn, Season 9, Gays Against Briggs. Out now, wherever you listen.
The Boston Celtics did what was expected Monday night and completed a sweep of the Tyrese Halliburton-less Indiana Pacers to clinch their spot in the NBA Finals. Their likely opponent in the championship round is the Dallas Mavericks, who, as we record this Tuesday morning, are a win away from completing their own conference final sweep of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Powering this Mavericks postseason run is the high-powered duo of Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. How dominant have they been during the playoffs? According to ESPN Stats and Info, Luka and Kyrie are the first starting backcourt to each have at least 30 points in the same game 3 times in a postseason in the last 50 years. Josh, when Luka and Kyrie were paired together last year, they struggled and missed the playoffs altogether. Now they're likely to be the title favorites if they finish off Minnesota. How good are these Mavericks to you?
I think it's a great question whether they'll be the favorites, and hopefully the finals will be competitive as opposed to these conference finals. But they strike me as the perfect pair for the rings or bust, championship or nothing mentality of the modern NBA and modern NBA fandom. Because, as you alluded to in your intro, Joel, it was total bust last year. Kyrie came on board and the team got worse. The defense was horrible. And I think that lined up with our kind of beliefs and expectations about these two players, neither of whom are known either for being strong defensive players or even making a genuine effort to play on that side of the court. And this year, we're hearing about them being the greatest offensive backcourt in the history of the NBA, and about how in this series and also in the other conference final, they've actually been super competitive games on an individual game level. And then at the end of the game, Stefan, game 2 being the starkest example with Luka hitting that amazing step back over Rudy Gobert, that it's all about having these transcendent offensive players, about having dudes, about having guys who, you know, when the game is close, come through in the clutch or are at least able to get a good shot off. And so we're just in this unprecedented era in the NBA, 6 straight different NBA champions. And I bet you that if the Mavericks win this year, I'm already going to guarantee that it's going to be 7 straight different NBA champions this year. You have Luka hobbling around. You have Kyrie in a unprecedented kind of era of like normal behavior. And so the Mavericks took a big gamble and it seems to be working out right now. But I'm surprised. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
It seems like the Mavericks season kind of turned around because they addressed the problem that you just addressed, Josh, which was they upgraded their defensive abilities in the middle of the season this year, trading for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, who are not like star names, max contract dudes, right? So they've been the ones that have really made this a full team, and they've got a great rookie in Derek Lively, who's played an important role, particularly around the rim. They're an interesting team to watch, and in no small part because Kyrie has been normal, and meaning normal off the court. He's been the same on the court in a lot of ways. I mean, maybe he's worked more closely with Luka and he has helped another player in a way that he hasn't helped another player become great or maintain that greatness or enhance that greatness the way he has in Dallas. But let's look back just a year when they acquired Kyrie. He was a distressed asset, which is crazy. In his 4 seasons with the Brooklyn Nets, he averaged 27 points a game. He was great when he was on the court, and that was not all the time. So the problem with Kyrie Irving was, would he continue to be a weirdo and a distraction and someone that fans and the media could galvanize around against and watch him sort of implode because he is talking crazy shit? Or would he just play basketball? And it seems like he's just played basketball. I don't know. Joel, do you think he just grew up, which is possible?
Well, hold on. Just to be more specific, just to remind people, he was suspended by the Nets for, quote, refusing to unequivocally say he has no anti-Semitic views. I don't want to euphemize it as just crazy shit. Let's remind people actually what is at hand here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a piece of it. I think that he's gotten older and matured. He's 32 years old. He's married. He's gone through a lot. And he even talked about it in a recent press conference where he just said, hey, it's good to breathe fresh air, get outside. Seasonal depression is real when you're growing up north. I spent 12 years in Eastern Conference cities. So you come out here and you're able to get outside and ground yourself a little bit more. The move and finding a franchise that after kind of, bouncing around with the Celtics and the Nets, which was a mess, it seems that maybe the Mavs have a little bit more stability, even though, this isn't the Mark Cuban, Donnie Nelson Mavericks or whatever. This is, the Miriam Adelson, Nico Harrison Mavericks. So this is a different Mavs franchise in a way, but he seems to have found comfort there. And unlike earlier in his career, when he sort of resented the fact that LeBron got all the credit when the Cavs won, it seems like he and Luka have really developed a symbiotic relationship, which is the kind of thing that you can have when you've worked a lot of different places and you're like, oh, I work with somebody that I appreciate and appreciates my contribution. And that kind of sets it up. So I don't know if it's just a vibes thing, Josh, but I definitely think that's some of it. And I do want to say one other quick thing is that we don't know what Kyrie was going through over the last couple years prior to this, but I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you can, you can go to therapy. You can get, the treatment and the help that you might need. And I just wonder if some of that stuff has been happening in the background, too, that has led him up to this point.
I think the only thing we can say with confidence is that he hasn't done or said anything publicly to bring disgrace upon himself or upon his employer. Like, we don't know what he's thinking or saying behind the scenes, but he hasn't been the proverbial distraction. And
isn't that a sign of professionalism, though?
It is.
If you can keep that, if you can tuck it in.
Yeah, I mean, we can't go into his Google history to see what kind of research he's doing these days.
He's being more professional than Aaron Rodgers is. I mean, he's not talking about being, RFK Jr.'s Veep candidate, but I think it's just so striking to read these stories about him being a calming influence for Luka in particular. Like, that's what all the beat writers are saying, and that's what Luka himself is saying. And Luka is known for being hot-headed on the court, for whining to the officials. I think it's a big issue for his on-court play and also for his, stardom and likability that, during any game, if you go on social media, and a lot of times after the games, people just cannot stop talking about what a whiner this guy is. And just like, it's after every play a lot of the time. And I think just based on what they say, and we have to believe them, like Kyrie is often the one who's like, getting his head back in the game and getting him to, focus. And if they say it, then I believe it. And if we can just shift to Luka for a second, he was a really high draft pick when he came out. He was traded famously for Trae Young on draft day, a trade that's looking good for the Mavericks, every season as it goes on. But I think similar to how his predecessor, Dirk Nowitzki did, I think he is changing perceptions of European players permanently, because there's no way that if he came out in the draft now that he wouldn't be the number one pick. He was dominating EuroLeague as a teenager. The videos were amazing of what he was doing. Maybe there was some like level of disbelief because he's just like not the most athletic guy in the world, even when he doesn't have like knee and ankle injuries. But there is no way that a guy with his pedigree, with his accomplishments at that stage would ever, in the history of the NBA, ever not get taken number one again. And with every shot he makes, and with that shot over Rudy Gobert, I think he is demonstrating that he is one of the best players in the league, has a chance to be one of the best players ever. And Stefan, I think, one of the tests in the finals, if they make it there, is will this, thing that seemed to be proven true throughout these playoffs, that like the team with the dudes, the team with the best players is going to come out at the end in these close games. Are the Maverick Stars going to be able to do the same thing against the Celtics, who are probably a better team from 1 through 5, at least in the starting lineup, but like are Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown kind of up to the level in those moments that Luka and Kyrie are?
I think Luka has demonstrated that he is up to those moments, even though he hasn't appeared in a finals yet. Look at these numbers for Luka. 43 career playoff games, 1,336 points, 400 rebounds, 355 assists. No one has hit those three totals in their first 43 playoff games. You have to go down to 1,100 points, 300 rebounds, and 300 assists to get to the next people on the list, and those people are LeBron James and Oscar Robertson. I mean, I have no doubt. I mean, who knows what'll happen, and you're a fool to try to predict the outcome of sports games, especially series in the NBA. But I mean, there's no indication that Luka won't be able to rise to this occasion. His temperament, his personality, and his ability are all just pointing toward he needed someone. I mean, the guys that have been his floor runners in recent years have been Jalen Brunson, who wasn't at the level he's been at with the Knicks, and Kristaps Porzingis and Spencer Dinwiddie. This is an upgrade. Good Kyrie is a gigantic upgrade.
I do think Kyrie is an upgrade, but I also think that if, we're in a different year in the Western Conference, that maybe the Mavs' shortcomings show up in a different way, right? Like if you have one of the traditionally great team in the conference finals, like let's just say that the Nuggets have made it through, because I actually think that the Timberwolves were a bad matchup for the Nuggets. But if the Nuggets had made it there, I wonder if like we would be saying the same things. But I actually want to take a brief tangent because I just think about how far we've come on European imports, like when the perception was that they were soft and skittish and not dependable, and like what the skepticism was towards Luka when he came out, right? It was just like, oh, he's dominated in this other league or whatever, but like, what does that have to do? And that's why he went number 3. But I always wonder, it's like, man, did Ricky Rubio have something to do with why there was some skepticism about him? Because the last great hyped Euro basketball player was Ricky Rubio. I remember, people had heard about him and saw clips of him before he was in the NBA, and then we got to see glimpses of him at the Olympics. And then he never really became what everybody said he was going to be. And I wonder if like that was the tax Luka paid going into the draft. And to take that point out a little bit further, like I'm just thinking about, there's been all these complaints about American basketball culture, right? They're like, oh, the AAU culture and all this other stuff. And like, dude, imagine if we had a national program that identified the best youth basketball players in this country by the time they were 13 and they were professionally trained from that time on. Like we might be producing players like that too. Luka Doncic was the best player in the world's second best league by the time he was 16 years old, right? Now, obviously everybody wouldn't be Luka, but it's just like, man, you wonder, you look at the development system over there and you wonder, I wonder if because we just don't want a primarily black labor force in college sports to get paid, which is going to change. It's something we're going to talk about in another segment. If there wasn't that sort of entrenched resistance to that maybe we could have the beautiful basketball that everybody idealizes in Luka, but I don't know. Maybe it won't happen. But if Luka has people look at the game and the development of players differently, then, man, that might be one of the biggest net changes and improvements in the league in quite a long time, even if he doesn't win a championship. But I got to think that, like, the way they're playing right now, and I mean, we've seen the Celtics. I like Tatum, I like Jaylen Brown, but imagining them trying to stop Kyrie and Luka for 7 games, I'm not seeing that happen, Josh.
Before we go, I want to just say a little bit about the Wolves. And the moment of the series was Luka saying, "You can't fucking guard me," to Rudy Gobert, which is like only slightly more direct than what Draymond Green has been saying about Rudy Gobert on the Inside the NBA set. And there's been a lot of kind of lamentation about, the future of Inside the NBA, because it seems like Turner is not going to be a part of this next NBA rights deal as NBC comes in. And so it's unclear what the fate of that show is. And so they're going out, if they are going out, I mean, they'll potentially have it next year. But like, as people are like celebrating the show and like, it's so great, they're so funny. Like, we have Draymond Green sitting in the middle of the set, in the middle of the table, being given an opportunity to have this kind of personal beef with Rudy Gobert on this national stage and this national platform. Draymond was suspended earlier this year for choking Rudy Gobert. They had a long-running feud even before that, with Draymond publicly mocking Rudy Gobert for crying about not making the All-Star team. Gobert saying that Draymond was a clown after he choked him. And just every game, it's like Draymond saying, they got to, get this guy off the court. He's, losing the series for them. He's like, they have Daniel Gafford on set and he's like coaching him about like how to go after Gobert. I mean, it's getting to the point of absurd and embarrassing for Draymond, but also for TNT, that they're giving this guy a venue. And the one thing that I think people love and respect about that show is its authenticity. And Draymond is a very engaging and charismatic person, but as a viewer, you just have the sense that he's not being real, that he's just using this as an opportunity to go after this guy that he doesn't like, that it's not actual basketball analysis. And
no, I mean, I think he's being real. I mean, I feel like this is about as real as it gets, right?
But Stefan, I was surprised, and I think we probably all were surprised when we saw Tom Haberstroh's piece after Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, that Rudy Gobert was leading all the players in the West in plus minus. The Wolves were better with him on the court than any team in the Western playoffs was with any other player on the court. And Draymond's just like running over the entire set and the entire show, and maybe it would make for better TV, but like the crowd is chanting Draymond sucks at him in Minnesota and he's chanting Rudy sucks. I mean, it's just, is that good TV? Is that what people want to see?
I don't think it's good TV. And what's confusing to me is that this is a time when Charles Barkley is publicly criticizing TNT for potentially losing the NBA and losing this show. This is a time of that the show has been heaped with praise for what it has meant for the league, for basketball, for entertainment for the last 20 years. My question is, why even have Draymond Green on that set? The set they've built, by the way, is tiny. And you've got these 4 giant guys plus Ernie Johnson sitting on this tiny set. Like, what's the added value of bringing Draymond into this iconic grouping of former players and commentators? Having a current NBA player that can analyze these guys in real time? I don't get it.
I think, Joel, and then you can finish us off, but I think the value of having Draymond is when they showed the clip of Karl Anthony Towns after Game 3 saying he shoots 1,500 shots a day, and Draymond coming on and saying he was lying, that he was capping. That was good TV. And he knows, and Kenny Smith and everybody else backed him up. There's no way that this guy is shooting 1,500 shots a day. And I could see was a moment of honesty, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care about making nobody really cares about making poor Karl Anthony Towns look bad. But that to me was showed the promise of what this could be, Joel.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was an interesting moment after Game 3 when he did do that. But The one thing that is kind of interesting and that you notice from Luka's reaction after hitting that step back over Rudy in game 2 is that, man, it kind of seems like not a lot of NBA players like Rudy Gobert.
He is voted the most overrated player in the league in a players poll. I think The Athletic did.
Yeah, there's something going on there. And I feel like Cat isn't probably too far behind them. So what you have with the Wolves is that they're kind of like lead wide punching bags. And Draymond is like maybe not the best messenger for that, right? Like if he's going to represent this generation of players on that panel, maybe he represents that, but maybe the guy that actually literally choked one of those players is not the dude that should be in judgment of them. But I mean, I guess I would say for better or worse, that's why you have Draymond on the panel, because he does that sort of thing. In the next segment, we'll bring on Michael McCann to talk about the end of amateurism.
Until 2 years ago, the NCAA's constitution included the following 2 sentences. Student athletes shall be amateurs in an intercollegiate sport, and their participation should be motivated primarily by education and by the physical, mental, and social benefits to be derived. Student participation in intercollegiate athletics is an avocation, and student athletes should be protected from exploitation by professional and commercial enterprises. Last week, the bedrock exploitative myth of collegiate amateurism was, after a century of this sort of blather, finally laid to rest. The NCAA agreed to pay $2.7 billion to settle 3 antitrust lawsuits and, for the first time, to share revenue directly with the athletes who generate it. We are joined now by Michael McCann. He's a law professor and director of the Sports and Entertainment Law Institute at the University of New Hampshire, and he's a senior sports legal reporter for the website Sportico. Hey, Michael, thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Stefan. Thanks for having me.
Before we get to the criticism and the potential roadblocks here, explain for us what the deal accomplishes and what has to happen for it to be implemented.
So the deal resolves 3 different antitrust litigations, including the House case. And those cases basically argue that the NCAA and its member schools violate antitrust law when they restrict what college athletes can make, essentially, especially make from their schools. That in a more free world, players would be able to get paid by schools and the like. So this case, this settlement, if it actually happens, I think that's a key point, that there's a lot from now until it's actually approved. But if it happens, it would resolve those cases, and there would be 2 components, big components to the settlement. One is paying damages for past harms. So players that could have made money on name, image, and likeness that weren't able to under NCAA rules, that could have been in video games that weren't published because of NCAA rules, and could have been paid to be on TV, especially their games, but for NCAA rules, will get somewhere in the ballpark, this is before the lawyers get their cut, of something like $2.7 billion. And that money will be distributed over players over the last 7 or 8 years, and it will vary tremendously in terms of what they get based on a variety of factors. The other big component is the going forward component, which is that the NCAA will agree to change its rules so players can be paid directly by colleges with a salary cap of about $21 million that's subject to going up or down depending upon revenues, and also revenue sharing by schools, by conferences. So the sort of system that you described at the start is gone, right? I mean, this is now sort of a version of pro sports at the college sports level. Now, colleges don't have to opt into this, and some, maybe most, won't. But this is a radically different system than what we've had.
All right, let's imagine a world in which the settlement doesn't get approved. There's a judge that needs to approve it. There's other antitrust cases, right? And then there's players who could potentially still bring litigation or decide not to resolve their litigation. So let's imagine that world. What are the likely reasons why this whole thing or part of this whole thing would get kiboshed?
There's so many ways in which, even if this gets approved, it doesn't resolve the NCAA's legal issues. Even in a best case scenario, it doesn't resolve the NCAA's legal issues. So one would be opt-outs, that in a class settlement, members can opt out. We've seen other big litigations where this happened in the NFL concussion settlement, players opted out. There are also legal challenges to the settlement itself, to appellate courts, even the United States Supreme Court. All of that could happen here. So again, this is the best case. The Judge Wilkin, approves it. There could be other litigation. And then there's the possibility of the fact that this only resolves 3 cases. Anyone else could sue tomorrow, the NCAA, in a different jurisdiction, perhaps. And also, a settlement isn't precedent. A settlement is just a private contract that gets approved by a court. It's not like this isn't like precedent for other cases. So there are those vulnerabilities. Then there's the big thing, which is whether college athletes are employees. And if they are employees, they would be able to, in some cases, unionize and seek collective bargaining agreements. This settlement, none of the terms have been bargained with the union. Now, they've been bargained with lawyers for plaintiffs, but that's not a protection under labor law. So everything is fair game. This whole deal could be challenged in antitrust litigation. Even if that doesn't happen, there's the major current of college athletes becoming employees, either at Dartmouth College, which they succeeded, it's on appeal, but they succeeded, or at USC or at other schools. And there's also, lastly, the Johnson v. NCAA case. That's a big case. That's a case in the Third Circuit. That's the case where the players argue they're employees under the Fair Labor Standards Act. That wouldn't give them the right to unionize, but it would guarantee them minimum wage and overtime pay.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm glad you brought up the college athletes piece of this, because that's the one that I guess I'm most interested in here, is that you're right. Like, none of these deals have been privy to any of these negotiations, right? So what is going to be the most likely mechanism for them to have some sort of stake at the table? Because that's going to have to be a part of any deal going forward, right?
Yeah, Joel, it has to be, because we're going to see player opposition. If this is just the lawyers huddling in a room with other lawyers, I don't think that's going to work for all sorts of reasons. And we've already seen athletes feel like they have been disenfranchised in terms of their voice, in terms of their rights, going back to all sorts of cases, including Ed O'Bannon's historic case. So if this is just a bunch of lawyers getting together, that's a bad playbook for resolution. So what could happen in lieu of that? I imagine we've already seen some non-union player associations come up. Their voices for athletes, although those are really trade associations, not to limit them, but they're not the same thing as a union. They're not recognized as a union, so they don't bargain. But I think ultimately we'll probably see college athletes recognized as employees, and some will join unions. In a way, that would make the world easier for the NCAA, because then they could bargain everything, and it's all exempt from antitrust law. What they really want, what I think Charlie Baker wants, is to get out of court, right? To stop all these cases. He's not getting that with the settlement. He's getting resolution for big ones, so that's valuable for him. But what he really wants, I think, is to get back to some sense of normalcy, not being in court all the time. To get that, I think he's going to have to say, look, players are, he's not going to do this tomorrow, but at some point, the NCAA is better off if players are in a union and they bargain, because then that removes antitrust law. Now, the NCAA may say, well, does that mean everyone's in a union? Does that mean they're all employees? Not necessarily. It really depends on a variety of factors. So it's the point. This all sounds complicated. It is, but it's not going to go away just because of the settlement.
Let's be clear. The people that negotiated this settlement are people that have decades of experience doing labor law. Jeffrey Kessler, in particular, is an attorney who has negotiated landmark deals in professional sports leagues. But this does feel piecemeal, Michael, to me, and it does feel like just one more step toward the eventuality that you're kind of describing here, which is the college sports behave, act, and function more like major leagues, with collective bargainings, with salary caps that have minimum and maximums, with revenue sharing that is broader than just within these individual units that are currently called conferences. So this feels so amorphous to me in some ways. Smaller conferences are really pissed off that they are being assigned by the NCAA to foot a disproportionate amount of the settlement costs here. Athletes are not going to be completely satisfied. $20 million per school seems very low. This is not like the 50 to 55% of revenue that we're accustomed to seeing in professional sports. So is it just a step as you're kind of describing here? I mean, because these feel like giant issues to me.
Yeah, I think it's a step, and I think you're right. Jeffrey Kessler is the right person to have in that room because he knows this better than anyone from the player's vantage point. But he also knows the limitations, and he knows that this system, as you just mentioned, that's being negotiated is a pro league. I mean, we're going to call it college sports, but this is professional sports. I mean, a salary cap, revenue sharing, what features make it not a pro sports? I guess they're not called employees because of the sort of NCAA's love of the word student athlete, but they are functioning like employees if they're just getting paid to play. So, or at a minimum, like independent contractors, but more likely employees. So this does seem piecemeal. This seems like part of an evolution that requires other steps. And if those steps don't happen, we'll remain in court for many years to come. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. Why is it 21 million? What would be the appropriate salary cap for the Southeastern Conference teams? Probably more than 21 million, I'm guessing. So why is it all the same amount? I mean, that in and of itself is an antitrust problem.
Yeah, off the top of my head, Michael, the one feature here that doesn't resemble professional sports, there is free agency now in college sports with the transfer portal, but players can't be traded. So maybe that would require an employee designation, but that seems like a real difference. And as far as this settlement, I want to move us away from the reasons this won't work and the reasons that this is interim to questions of implementation. Because when I talk about this with folks, the question that they have, I think the question that school administrators have is Title IX. Does this mean that the salary cap for women's sports is 10 million and for men's sports it's 10 million because everything has to be equal? Does it mean, is every starter on the football team going to be paid the same amount of money as every other starter? Is there going to be a set salary for field hockey? And how will that look compared to golf? Like, I think the answer is we don't know, but I'm curious for your thoughts on any of those and which of those to you is kind of the most striking.
I mean, on the player traded, you're right. Although I could see schools facilitating transfers from one school to another as part of agreements between them. So you're right. I mean, there may not be trades, but I could see something akin to a trade, or at least the facilitation of player movement by the schools. In terms of Title IX, absolutely. It is a major hurdle, and the settlement cannot create, it would be unwise to create Title IX problems to resolve antitrust problems. And Judge Wilkin has said so much during oral arguments that you still have to comply with all laws. So what does that mean? Yeah, we don't know. We don't know the details of it. We do know that Title IX requires equity in terms of the treatment of men and women's athletes. And certainly if the men's players are getting most of the money, that is immediately a Title IX problem. And in a pro sport, we might say, well, that's okay because the men's league generates more. NBA players can make more money than WNBA players because they're generating more revenue. That argument collapses at the college level because there's no Title IX requirement for the NBA and WNBA. There is for colleges. So that will certainly be an issue. And then beyond that, there'll be issues of immigration. How will this affect student visas? If you're getting paid to play, that traditionally has been seen as a likely violation of immigration law. So we could be seeing immigration issues as well. So the details, and also how much each school pays. And in terms of players, what they get paid, yeah, do they all get paid the same? I don't think they're going to like that. Do they get slotted by position that the quarterback makes 3 times what the offensive lineman makes? Or who knows what the metrics are? Or is it more of a market? Do we say this star, we're going to devote most of our salary cap, we're going to pay $3 million to get this quarterback because he's once in a generation. That means we'll have to pay less for other positions. That may be part of it. And I think we'll see salary cap experts hired by teams. I think it could be a whole new marketplace of occupations for schools.
You know, Michael, it was just a week ago that we were talking about the NCAA's multi-million-dollar lobbying effort to preserve amateurism, right? Like that is going on concurrently. So all this stuff is happening in front of us. In the background, the NCAA is like working to lobby Capitol Hill, all this other stuff. So you tell us, like, is that dead now then? I mean, is there really no hope of us? Is there really no chance that we'll ever slide back towards amateurism, or because of the confusion and the time that it's going to take to implement all this, that there's still a chance that the NCAA's money would produce some good for them by holding off on accepting that amateurism no longer exists?
Yeah, you're right, Joel, that this could take a couple of years to play out. This whole settlement process could take 2 or even 3 years before there's finality, depending upon how it gets challenged. So again, this is best case scenario for NCAA. This assumes that there isn't the athletes as employees doesn't take off. And so will the NCAA get something back for all the money they're spending on lobbying? I know that they keep trying, right? They're still lobbying for a federal law that, as I understand it, would grant a limited antitrust immunity so that they can negotiate basically with lawyers for the players a system that would normally be negotiated with the union. So that would be one exemption. And then the other piece that the NCAA wants would be a declaration that college athletes are not employees, at least under federal law. Under state law, that they can't do that. They can try to preempt it, but that would create potential preemption problems. And there's also potential due process and equal treatment problems with that. But yeah, I mean, they're clearly still going to spend money on lobbying, as far as I can tell. It looks like they believe they'll get something. And I think, maybe with Charlie Baker being more of a politician than his predecessor, he certainly, I think, comes across in a more favorable way in terms of how he presents himself than his predecessor. But at the end of the day, Joel, Congress has done nothing. They couldn't even get an NIL bill. I mean, NIL seems like a nothing burger now, right? They couldn't even get that passed. Whereas at the state level, we saw overwhelming percentages of Republicans and Democrats supporting it. But at the federal level, it just breaks down. And I think part of that has to do with other lobbying. I mean, there could be labor groups lobbying. There could be universities lobbying. I mean, there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And I think the NCAA, in a way, maybe doesn't have the same kind of control it hopes it believes it should be getting for the money it's spending.
Like you said, Michael, it's going to be a long time, I think, before this gets fully resolved. Michael McCann is a law professor, director of the Sports and Entertainment Law Institute at the University of New Hampshire. He also writes for Sportico. Michael, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And now it is time for Afterball, sponsored by Bennett's Prune Juice, endorsed by Kenny Sailors, who said it was okay. So tied at 3 in the bottom of the 9th, the final Pac-12 game in any sport gave its fans a final taste of some Pac-12 after dark late Saturday night. The Pac-12 baseball championship game between USC and Arizona was down to 2 more outs in the 9th inning. And that's when Tommy Splain came up to the plate for the Wildcats with base runners on first and second base. At that point in the night, Splain was 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. Here's what happened next.
Pac-12. Line, left field, base hit, charging as Wells. Here comes Corona. Throw to the plate. Safe, and Arizona wins!
In case you didn't pick up on the action in the clip, Splain singled to left field, scoring Emilio Corona from second base to clinch the Pac-12 title for Arizona. And, of course, that was the final Pac-12 game for the league as we know it. 10 teams will be joining 2 leagues, and Oregon State and Washington State will be, at least for a few years, stuck out in the wilderness. There's already been a lot of tributes and obituaries for the league that was officially founded in 1968, but whose roots go back to 1915. So I won't prattle on about the awful consequences of another round of realignment and the almost unfathomable loss of a major college conference based on the West Coast. But I'll say this, and it really became real for me a few months ago when I was goofing off with my son Desmond in the Pac-12 Plaza, which is right next door to the Cobb Track in Angel Field and the Aquatic Center there on Stanford's campus. There's some artificial hills back there that I let Des run up and down as he got more sure of himself and steadier on his feet. Anyway, after months of this, one day Des looked up and said, "No flags." And that's when I realized that they had removed all 12 school flags that lined the front of the Pac-12 Plaza. The flags made for a really cool scene, a sort of a reminder that this is a major college athletics program you're at right now. And now all those flags are gone. And so, look, I doubt Stanford renames the area ACC Plaza and raises the flags of Boston College and Wake Forest next fall, but hopefully I'll be around and check out to see what happens. But anyway, Saturday was Arizona and Tommy Splain's night. Splain's walk-off single officially secured the Wildcats' bid for the NCAA tournament. Arizona will be the number 13 seed and host the Tucson Regional this weekend. And a little about Tommy Splain. He chose Arizona because that's where his father went to school. He's from Los Gatos High School, a school in the affluent Silicon Valley suburbs out here in the Bay. But, I mean, let's be honest, all of them are affluent suburbs out here, right? He's a junior now, mostly splitting time at catcher for the Wildcats, and he hit .237 with 5 homers this spring. Not the greatest numbers, but he came through for Arizona when it counted. And so, Stefan, who's your Tommy Splain?
As Josh mentioned at the top of the show, Bill Walton died on Sunday at the age of 71. The NBA said the cause was colon cancer. Tributes poured in from across the basketball world and beyond about Walton's college dominance at UCLA under John Wooden, about his NBA championships with the Trailblazers in '77 and the Celtics in '86, about his gregarious personality, his rambunctious on-air charm, his generous soul, and his love of the Grateful Dead. Drummer Mickey Hart said in a statement, "Bill was my best friend. He was an amazing person, singular, irreplaceable, giving, loving." We'll discuss Bill Walton in our bonus episode for Slate Plus members, but for now, we're going to bring back an Afterball I did on March 4th, 2019, about what was probably the wildest moment in his amazing life, one that hasn't gotten a huge amount of attention in the outpouring of memories about who Walton was. Here it is, and thanks for listening. You may have seen the video last week of Bill Walton visiting with the gymnastics team at his alma mater, UCLA. Wearing a tie-dyed t-shirt, Walton grabs a high bar while a gymnast twirls next to him. He lies on a mat while gymnasts tumble over him. At the end of the clip, which Walton posted on Twitter, he's lying on his back with an ice pack on his forehead.
Did I make the team?
All right, that's the Bill Walton we all know, goofy, loopy, lovable old deadhead turned broadcaster. But in the 1970s, starting with when he played for John Wooden at UCLA and was arrested during a campus anti-war demonstration, Walton was a real deal member of the sports counterculture. I'd forgotten just how much. Walton was close to Jack Scott, the anti-establishment sports activist and reformer who founded the Institute for Study of Sport and Society at Berkeley and worked with, among others, Tommy Smith and John Carlos of Olympics fame, the NFL player Dave Megacy, and Chip Oliver, the Oakland Raiders linebacker who quit to join a commune, whom I talked about a few weeks ago. In a September 1975 story in the New York Times Magazine, our friend Robert Lipsight wrote that Scott and his partner Mickey McGee lived with Walton in an old rental house in Portland and counseled and encouraged him during his rough rookie season with the Trailblazers in 1974. Walton lost weight and the Blazers wanted him to start eating meat, which he refused to do. He also refused to take cortisone shots and painkillers for a bone spur. And he was accused of faking injury to get out of his contract to go play for the Lakers. That, Lipsight explained, hardened Walton's distrust of what Walton called the major white upper-class media, which also had characterized him as a dupe of Jack Scott. "Yeah, my guru," Walton told Lipsight. "In this society, they don't expect an athlete to speak for himself or to be able to lead his own life. The only thing I'm supposed to know is how to put the ball through the hoop. Everything else is said for me or explained to me, right?" Walton's relationship with Scott would get him questioned by the FBI in 1975 in connection with the case of Patty Hearst, the heiress who was kidnapped by and participated in crimes with a terrorist group called the Symbionese Liberation Army. Scott and McGee disappeared for a few months in early 1975 and were believed to have been hiding Hearst in a farmhouse in Pennsylvania. Walton drove from Portland to San Francisco to be interviewed by the FBI. He said he never talked about Hearst with Scott and didn't know where Scott was. Shortly before he died in 1990, Scott told the FBI that he had, in fact, hidden Hearst from the police. A month after talking to the FBI, though, Walton renounced the meeting at a news conference arranged by Jack Scott's lawyer. Walton said he was terribly sorry that he had cooperated in any way, shape, or form with such a counterproductive organization as the FBI, which he called the enemy. He name-dropped Mahatma Gandhi and endorsed a discipline of love, truth, and justice, and he urged the people of the world to stand with us in our rejection of the U.S. government. In a profile around the same time in the music and culture magazine Crawdaddy, Walton was asked if he was in fact trying to get out of his Trailblazers contract. Walton responded by talking about the ills of the ruling class and writers attempting to discredit him, quote, so that people will think what I do is so much jive. My success, Walton said, is their failure. This line of thinking went over great in the major white upper-class media, of course, which pointed out that Walton was being paid a lot of money to play a game and that he lived in a country in which he was free to criticize the government. Walton said he liked playing basketball at the highest level and that being paid well wasn't incompatible with believing that society was messed up. As for the money, Walton noted that it was spread over years of deferred payments. Given the economic situation in this country, he said, no one knows what that paper money will be worth by the next time I get to see it. It may be next to worthless.
That was great, Stefan. It's good when an Afterball stands the test of time, as that one does. The three of us all watched parts of the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary series, The Luckiest Guy in the World, and there is some about the Walton-Jack Scott relationship in there. I'd encourage everybody to check out that series, at least one part of it, if not all four. And the thing that really struck me, and we can talk about this more in our bonus maybe, is that at this moment when Bill Walton was really aligned with Jack Scott, Joel, he was not yet bulletproof as an NBA player. He was often injured. The Blazers hadn't won their championship yet. He was seen as a malingerer. He was seen as being potentially a bust. And yet, I think, and Walton addressed this, the documentary addresses this, I think because of his race, he was given a level of grace and permission to call out the FBI, to be extremely radically left-wing in a way, that Colin Kaepernick, who was doing things that were so much more benign and inoffensive than what Bill Walton was doing, a kind of level of grace that Kaepernick was not extended to. Like, that's just where my mind went.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that as a Black American, speaking for myself and maybe a few people who understand where I'm coming from, you wish every so-called great white hope was Bill Walton. He's actually one of those people, and I'm sure that they're probably, if you want to dig through his past, he lived 71 years. I'm sure he wasn't perfect in everything. But to me, at least, and certainly, after reading about his life here in the last 24 hours or so, he actually becomes more impressive the more you read about him and the more I learn about him. And I'm actually sort of sad that I had not dedicated more time to learning about him and his career until last night, because I always had been a fan. Like, all the things that we say about him, all the things he's being revered for today, I knew that. But I just have a deep respect for the man that he was in the face of a lot of criticism. And yeah, you're right. Like, there was a segment, they ran a little segment in that documentary where they said they were talking about his legendary support of Grateful Dead. He's a big fan of the group, the Grateful Dead. And one of the fans says, well, there's a lot of people here in Portland that wishes Bill Walton was dead, or something along those lines. And I was like, damn, like, it wasn't, just a yellow brick road for him the whole way. So, I can't wait to learn more about him here over the next few days and stuff. But a tremendous loss. 71 years is not a very long time, man. I wish he had more of them.
Yeah, just to say, just because he wasn't kicked out of the NBA and wasn't treated like Kaepernick, it does, as you alluded to in your Afterball, Stefan, it doesn't mean that he wasn't criticized extremely harshly by journalists, by fans, and by the league, by people connected to the league.
Yeah, he was. And yet, the one thing that I think separates Bill Walton from so many other athletes And it's not just his progressive beliefs. It's that he stuck to his beliefs in the face of that criticism. He never backed down. He never changed. I mean, when he was arrested as an undergraduate for protesting the Vietnam War, and this quote was in Richard Sandemir's obituary in the New York Times, he told a sports writer then, "The blacks have gotten a raw deal for a long time. A lot of my teammates are black, and I really admire the way they've risen above their raw deal. They're my friends, and I feel for them. I know I've gotten twice as much as I deserve because I'm white." I mean, Bill Walton wasn't just the personality that the vast majority of sports fans recognize from television. He was a guy with sincere beliefs that he sustained throughout his life.
We're going to discuss more about Bill Walton's life and legacy in our bonus episode. But for now, that is all for this episode. To hear it, to hear the bonus episode, that is, subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangup+ to get access wherever you listen. Our bonus episode on Bill Walton is available right now. We will see you there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer this week, filling in for Kevin Bendis, is Emily Cherish. For Joel Anderson and Stefan Fatsis, I'm Josh Levin. Remember Zelmo Beatty, and thanks for listening.
At Bet365, we don't do ordinary. We believe that every sport should be epic. Every home run, every hit, every inning, every play. From the moments that are legendary to the ones that fly under the radar. Whether it's a walk-off grand slam or a base hit to center field. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. 21 plus only. Must be physically located in Virginia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.